about your childhood and how that led you to boxing?
Yeah, that's where it starts. That's the genesis of it. So I think it was a combination of a few different things. Rocky came out, so I started watching the Rocky movies at a very young age. I was also into professional wrestling. And on some level, even at a young age, 5, 6, 7 years old, I knew it was fake. Back then, they protected the wrestling industry a little more, so most people didn't really know whether it was, I mean, adults did, but most people really didn't know whether it was real or not. But on some level, I knew it wasn't real. And then I watched the Rocky movies, and then I knew I was watching cinema. And then I came across Mike Tyson fight on HBO, and then that was the almost like a middle ground of both of my passions. That was wrestling and boxing in a sense, and it probably helped that Hulk Hogan, the Thunder Lips character, was in the movie as well. But yeah, Rocky was probably the catalyst of it. Rocky and wrestling, and then as a kid growing up, I got in a lot of little street fights as most kids do growing up. But I think I got in more than the average person, and just always ending up in fights on a weekly basis. And then I grew up in Elmont. I moved over to Plainview when I was about 11 years old, almost 12 years old. And I picked right back up where I left off, where I was getting in trouble in Elmont all the time. I was getting in trouble in Plainview just the same. I always found the wrong crowd. And I was getting in fights again on a regular basis, always, and had a target on my back and a chip on my shoulder. And I didn't start boxing until I was about 17 years old, but it was something that I always wanted to do. But my family kind of figured it was a phase I was going through and eventually it would go away, which it didn't. I wish I started boxing when I was 9, 10, 11 years old, because then I wouldn't have had any afflictions in life, which by the time I was 17 years old, I was already smoking cigarettes. I was already experimenting with drugs. I was already drinking, And then I started boxing, and I was dedicated to it, but I was also dedicated to the other life, which is basically partying and having fun. I'd go to the gym, I'd work out hard, and then I'd go out at night and party hard. And those things wouldn't have transpired had I started boxing and had that discipline at a younger age. But again, I mean, how's an 8-year-old going to start? Right. Your family nobody wants their kid to box. They want their kid to play baseball or basketball or something. So my family kind of figured it was a phase and they would go away, and it never did. This is the first gym I walked into. I had actually read a story in Newsday, and the story was about Willie Wise. And then it mentioned the Westbury gym and had the address of the gym. And I came here with my friend Brian. I remember walking in here, and that first ring over there was a couple of heavyweight sparring. The guy's name was, he was a police officer named Dwight, I remember specifically. And we walked in the gym, and he said, he was in between rounds, he was getting water, and his shoelace became untied. And he said, tie my shoe. And even at 17 years old, I wasn't just going to tie somebody's shoe. And my friend Brian just dipped right down and tied his shoe immediately. And I remember thinking to myself in my head, like, bitch. And it's just, he just didn't have the temperament of a fighter Brian did. And me, I'm not tying anybody's shoe, regardless of where I am. So unless you say, say it in a different manner, do me a favor or help me out. But anyway, we spoke to Pete Brodsky, who was running the gym at that point. And Pete told my friend Brian, he said, you need to lose a few pounds, and then I think you should start running and come back to the gym in a couple of weeks. And, once you're down a few pounds, and then get going. And if you want, you can come back Monday. And I met a trainer named Frank Daly later on that day. And then Frank told me the same deal. He said, come back Monday. He said, all right, so I'll be back Monday. My friend Brian, who drove there, because I didn't have a car at the time, Monday came around, and Brian was no longer interested in the gym or losing weight or boxing or anything. So I had to figure out means to get here at 17 years old and broke with no car, and I wasn't living at home either at the time. And I remember I came to the gym that Monday. I believe
how did you get here?
I got dropped off. That was I grubbed a ride, as we used to say. So I got a ride to the gym, and Frank Daly didn't show up. So I pretty much just hit the bag with these little, those little almost like MMA gloves that they used to have. These tiny little gloves. I had no hand wraps or anything. And I just pounded the bag for a few rounds, and then I'm there. How am I getting home? And I walked all the way from Westbury to Plainview, straight down Old Country Road. I've never done the mileage on it. It's got to be easily it's got to be an 8-mile walk. It didn't make a difference to me.
When did you next come back? Did you come back the next day?
Pretty much, yeah. I always figured out a way to get to the gym a couple of times. I would always get a ride to the gym, and sometimes I'd have a friend that would hang out at the gym and watch me work out or whatnot, because they all thought it was cool. They were all into boxing. Yeah. And then I'd have a ride home. Other times I would just get dropped off, and then I would take a cab home or I'd figure something out.
What was it about this sport that kept you doing that?
I always wanted to do it. So when I finally got the opportunity to do it, and I was adult enough to at least get here or figure out how to get here on my own, that was a wrap for me. So I was coming here on a regular basis. And again, I was 17 years old. So at 17 years old, you're essentially an adult. You're close to an adult, not legally, but at 17, again, I already had afflictions. I was already, I had already moved out of my house at 17 years old. I was living with my girlfriend at the time.
Were your parents aware you were coming here?
Yes. I started boxing in September of '97, and it wasn't that long after. It was only a few weeks after I started boxing, actually, that I moved out. That I had a big blowout at home, and then I moved down and moved in with my girlfriend. But yeah, so I didn't even get a car until, I don't know, 4 or 5 months later. So my first 5 months of boxing, from September of '97 until probably February or so, January, February or so of '98, I just had to figure out how to get here. And I managed to get here one way or another. And then I started training with Link Sanders.
I remember Link, yeah.
And then I was with Link for pretty much my whole amateur career.
Okay. Is there any moment that really tested your soul, whether it was in the ring, not even the logistics of getting here, anything about the sport that tested you, that made you, gave you pause?
No, I still remember my first sparring session like it was yesterday, who was with and exactly where it was. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Matter of fact, that was part of my gimmick with getting rides here with friends, because they thought it was good. I'd be like, oh, listen, you get to see me, because my friends, I used to get in street fights all the time. So my friends, I would fight after school in a park or something, and a million people would show up to watch it. So then when I would tell my friend, hey, listen, I'm gonna spar, come watch me spar. All right, I'll give you a ride to the gym. So that was my little gimmick to get them to give me a ride to the gym. And then I would borrow a video camera from my friend Brandon. And I used to record all my sparring sessions, just so I can kind of go home and check them out and study them. So a few of them didn't go my way, but a majority of them did. Like, I was pretty decent from the get-go. So I used to record all my sparring sessions, come down here, and I didn't train right in the beginning. I mean, but I don't know. I mean, I would come down here, all I wanted to do was spar. If I could spar 5 days a week, I would. So yeah, there were a couple of ass-kickings involved. That's part of the growing process, but nothing was determined when I first started. I was happy to be here. I was hungry to be here, and every day that I came here, I wanted to put the gloves on and fight somebody.
Who was the first sparring session against, and what do you remember about it?
I'll tell you who it was. So a kid I went to high school with, his name is Jonathan Rainone. I'm still in touch with him to this day. So I went to middle school with him. Let's take it back even further. Forget about high school. I went to middle school with him. So I was friends with his sister Julie, and Jonathan went to Catholic school. So after we graduated from middle school, I hadn't seen Jonathan for probably 3 years, because he went to Catholic school. I went to public school, and I walk into the boxing gym, and Jonathan's like, hey, how you doing? And I'm looking at him. I didn't really recognize him right away, because I hadn't seen him in like 3 years. And I'm just like, oh, Jonathan, what's going on? How are you? And I think I used to bully Jonathan a little bit in middle school, and he never forgot about that. All right, so my first sparring session, Pete Brodsky was training him, and we got in that ring right there, and I've never been so tired in my life. I specifically remember that first sparring session, but again, I always knew how to fight, and I was always pretty elusive. But you go to a boxing gym to polish. Essentially, most people that step foot in a boxing gym, you're already fighting your whole life, and then you step into a boxing gym to really polish your skills. You have a certain skill set, or a certain toughness, or a certain thing to you. So I got in there with Jonathan, and for the first two rounds, I was doing really well. I was hitting with all kinds of shots. I was avoiding a lot of shots, and I was throwing haymakers and wild shots, and they were landing. And he wasn't the most elusive guy in the world. He was a tough, just come forward, gritty guy. And I was making a miss, but I remember I went back to the corner after the second round. I was absolutely exhausted. I was finished. My lungs were on fire. I smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. I don't run. I just started boxing. And I wanted to climb out of the ring, and Pete Brodsky says to me, it's just like, you got one more round in you? And I'm like, yeah. And the bell rang, and I didn't even get out of that corner right there. The bell rang, and Jonathan put me right in the corner, and just 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And my head was ricocheting back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I took it, got out of the round, the bell finally rang, and that was that. It was my first sparring session, but that third round, I got an ass kicking. And I had my first amateur fight in May of '98 was my first one. So if you do the math on it, really isn't boxing that long. That's not how you traditionally want to groom a fighter. Usually you have them train for at least like a year or so. And as a matter of fact, my first amateur fight was at Church Street Boxing Gym in Manhattan. I was supposed to fight in February, and we showed up, and that was a club show, so they pre-match you. When you get there, it's not a tournament thing, so there's no guarantees. And that's exactly what happened. I got there, and there was nobody for me that was in my weight class and with the same experience, age, so on. So I would have had my first fight in February if I could have, but then I had to wait until May.
Okay. And how was the amateur experience for you?
The amateurs, especially in New York in the late 90s and the very early 2000s, it was a scene of just good fighters, especially in and around my weight class. So you had so many guys like Luis Collazo, Yuri Foreman, Gato Figueroa, so many guys. They made it on the pro level, obviously Paul Malignaggi, who was a little smaller than me, but they all made it big on a pro level. But they were guys like Joey Rios, Darling Jimenez. I had somewhere in the ballpark of 35 amateur fights, and I think 11 of those 35 fights was against guys that were nationally ranked in the top 10. That's not great luck. Percentage-wise, I mean, that's like 35% of your fights are against, world champions almost, if you were talking about like at a pro level.
Right. And did you fight Collazo in the amateurs?
Yeah, I fought Collazo twice. Collazo was actually my first open class fight, which was quite the experience because, as you know, I mean, the experience level, your first open class fight, you might have 6, 7 fights, and you could be fighting somebody with 90 fights, and that was pretty much what it was. I think it was my 8th amateur fight, and I didn't know who he was. I just saw some Puerto Rican kid with an afro and covered in tattoos. Fuck this guy. And the bell rang, and he did the Drago thing. We came to touch gloves in the middle of the ring. He smashed my gloves down. I'm like, I'm gonna fuck this guy up. And he took a good look at me for about 30, 35 seconds the first round, let me, figured out my timing, figured out my rhythm, and then he started fighting. And by the end of the first round, I thought I was getting jumped. I was like, holy shit. And I got a couple of standing 8 counts in that fight because in New York, that's why I always hated the amateurs, and I feel it's very discouraging because in New York, you get your head snapped back, and they'll give you a standing 8 count. More so if you're a guy like me that's a slick guy that's elusive and you don't get hit with a lot of shots. So you're making the guy miss, and then you get hit with one shot, your head snaps back, so it's more of a dramatic effect. It has more amplification. And then the referee will jump in and give me an 8 count. I'm like, what the fuck? So I remember Steve Willis was actually my referee in that fight. And I'm actually grateful because Steve let fights go. A lot of referees might have stopped that fight. And I made the distance, made it 3 rounds. I got my ass kicked pretty good. And after that fight, I remember that was the first time I really got my ass kicked in my life, in a street fight or otherwise, in a sparring session, a street fight, an amateur fight. And I was cried after that fight. And I was with my father outside of the Freeport PAL, which is where the fight was, on Guy Lombardo. And he's just like, no, the guy just has more experience than you. I'm like, no, listen to me. The guy is going to be a world champion. The guy is really good. And and I was right about that. P.S. I have to fight the guy again 2 months later. I never got an easy break. So now I'm fighting that was in the Metros. Now I'm fighting the Golden Gloves 2 months later, and I'm in the dressing room, and they're like, Rainone, they start calling out the names. Rainone and Collazo. And I'm like, motherfucker. And I got to fight him in the first round of the Golden Gloves, and then probably like 15 minutes later, my father actually got into the dressing room. He's like, you know who you're fighting, right? I said, I know. And he's just like, kick his ass. And this time I came out more aggressive and knew that he was going to let me get off early and that he would then start fighting after about 45 seconds to a minute. And once he started doing that, I started matching him. And I took the first round, went back to the corner, and then he, again, stepped at the pace even more the second round. And, he beat me again, but it was far more competitive the second fight. And I was able to hang with him. But Collazo was a hell of a fighter. But that's just the way it was. That was my first open class fight. Then I had a quick little fight in New Jersey, and then I came back to New York and then entered another tournament, and boom, I get Collazo again.
So when did you make the decision to go pro?
Oh, shit, when I was 7 years old. So I started at 17. My last amateur fight, I just turned.
You had a break, right? You took
Yeah. So I started at 17. My last amateur fight, I had just turned 23 years old. And at 23 years old now, my friends are traveling. They're going out on a regular basis. There's nightclubs, there's girls, there's fun. So I was always having my fun outside of boxing and partying with my friends. But it was bullshit. It was hanging out at parks. It was hanging out at people's houses, things like that. It was we're all under 21. Now we're 23, everybody's working, even though we're not making a lot of money, everyone's got a little bit of money in their pocket. And my friends are starting to travel a little bit and go away here and there for the weekend. So I wanted to do that, So you can't do both, it's one or the other. So I started cutting corners with the boxing even more than I already was. And then I lost a couple of close decisions. And I realized, what, it's not just the politics of boxing. I'm not living the right life, So if it's a close split decision that can go either way, he deserves it more than me. He's living a better life than me. He's dedicated. He's hungry. He wants to go somewhere. I'm fucking around left and right. So it was discouraging to lose some of these close decisions, and I blamed it on politics and popularity. But it was also, I wasn't doing the right things. So I told myself, you know what, I'm gonna stop, I'm gonna take a year off. I'm gonna travel, I'm gonna have fun, I'm gonna go to clubs, I'm gonna meet girls, I'm gonna have fun with my friends, and then I'm gonna get it all out of my system, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna start boxing next year and turn pro. And 1 year turned into 2, 2 years turned into 3. It's like telling somebody you're gonna take a year off of college and go back, and then you just don't go back. And none of my friends thought I was going, but they're like, yeah. I'm like, no, I'm gonna start boxing again next week. Yeah, okay, we've been hearing that for a year. And then I was in Miami on vacation, and I'll tell it how it actually was. I was in a hotel room with one of my buddies, a couple of girls hanging out, and we were doing cocaine. And in front of my friend, I put the biggest line of coke you've ever seen. And I said, this is the last time you ever seen me do coke. He said, yeah, I've heard that before. Went to sleep, and Monday I went back to the gym. I'm done with the partying. I'm gonna train hard, train right. I started running, which is something I never did in the amateurs. Now I'm running like 3 miles a day, getting myself in shape, getting my body strong. And then I was training here for a couple of weeks, and then I had my first sparring session, which turned out to be with a guy that would be my assistant trainer later on in my boxing career as a pro, Chris Padilla. So I sparred Chris down here, and it was like that first sparring session that I had at 17 years old with Jonathan Arena all over again. It was like starting from scratch. I went out there, he couldn't lay a glove on me for the first 2 rounds, and then I was winded as could be. Now I was exhausted, and he whipped my ass again the 3rd round. And I said, I got a lot of work to do. And then I linked up with Jorge Gallardo as my trainer and started going from there. And Jorge was the perfect fit for me, the perfect match for me. It was a good marriage as far as stylistically. Jorge's very good with southpaws. Jorge's got a slick style. I have a slick style. He trained Jake. I have a similar style to Jake. And so it worked out. The anxiety level in the amateurs was huge. I remember fighting in New Jersey. And I went down there with my trainer, Link, and it was me and Udi Santos, who's a guy from my gym, and this other kid, Jimmy Cucinato, the 3 of us. They brought us to this show in New Jersey. There were probably 15 bouts on the card. I somehow landed 14th on the card, all right? So Jimmy fought early, had a first-round knockout, hasta la vista, left. Santos fought somewhere around 10th, he left. I'm fighting 14th. Everybody clears out. The room went from a room this size went from having 120 people in it to having about 10 people in it. And now when Santos was fighting, my trainer Link and my assistant trainer Renson, obviously not there, they're with Santos in the corner. And I'm by myself and I'm pacing back and forth. And I got my gloves on, not my headgear yet, but I got my gloves on and I'm looking over at my opponent and he's hitting the pads with his trainer. It sounded like fireworks going off. And I remember I just wanted to go home. I remember I'm in Jersey, I'm in the middle of New Jersey, and I remember just staring at the back door, just like, how do I walk out of here? Like with my gloves on and my trunks on and get the fuck out of here. I don't want to be here. Like the anxiety level was, the tension, it was like going to the electric chair. And I won that fight. I fought really well in that fight, and that's how most of my amateur fights were, that there was a lot of discomfort and panic beforehand. In the pros, I was a lot more relaxed. So getting back to your initial question, my professional debut, I was calm as can be. I remember, like, I was almost too calm. I remember I had to get chased back to the dressing room because I was hanging out with my friends and family during the undercard, watching a couple of the fights. And then I remember being in the dressing room, and there's this one fighter who's going before me. He's pacing back and forth, hitting himself in the face, punching the walls, and I'm thinking to myself, what an asshole. I was calm and cool as can be. Like, I was just happy to be there, ready to go, focused. I knew I trained hard. I knew I was ready. I knew I waited my whole life for this, and I went out there and delivered.
You made the decision to manage yourself, and that was, that was a lot of extra work for you.
Yeah.
Just talk about the fact that you were self-managed for most of your career and the pros and cons of that.
Oh, definitely pros and cons to it. It wasn't something that was done by design. I was talking to a guy whose name I won't even bother mentioning. I knew nothing about the pro game and how things worked and the difference between boxing and business. And Sal Musamichi was doing a show at the Huntington Hilton, and then I reached out to him, and he was willing to put me on the card. And I took whoever they offered me. And so I got the first fight done on my own, and then I said to myself, well, if I got that done on my own, why do I need a manager to give 15 or 20 or 30% to? And then I did the second one on my own, and then the third one on my own, and then I just managed myself. I just kind of learned along the way. Well, there's pros and cons. The pros are that you're in control of your own destiny, which I like to be, okay? But the cons are when you're dealing with the matchmakers and you're dealing with the promoters directly, you're not getting the same level of respect that you would get if you had somebody representing you. That's at least my take on it. And I feel like I had to make constant concessions throughout my career to keep things going, whether it was concessions usually on money, a lot of times on weight, a a lot of times on rounds where they wouldn't give me an 8-rounder, I had to fight yet another 6-rounder because that makes the budget cheaper, right? And then, of course, on opponents, because they just want to put me in a winnable situation, okay, and they want me to move tickets, and everybody's happy. Where the progression of my career is not their main concern, because I'm not signed to them, So if I want to fight a guy that's 10-2, and I feel like this guy can get me to the next level, but they can get a guy that is 8-8 or 8-6, and they can get him for $300 cheaper and no flight, they're going to go in that direction. I feel if I had a manager representing me, those things probably would have been a little easier.
Talk about the pressure of selling tickets and
it's a constant distraction. It's a constant worry. It's a constant obligation. So there's training for the fight and there's moving tickets. There's training for the fight. There's moving tickets, and then you're dealing with so many different people that you have to stay on top of. You're cashing checks. You're loaning money. You're keeping track of money. Keeping track of tickets. It's a constant distraction. And again, I guess that's part of being self-managed, right? But most fighters have to go through it. Unfortunately, it's a part of the business on the lower level, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. So now that my career is over, I miss the boxing, I truly do, but I don't miss the business whatsoever. That's also my leverage to get opportunities, So I'd have to, sell myself to the promoter, and that I could bring X amount of people there and move X amount of tickets or guarantee X amount of money. And they, work the numbers and crunch the numbers in their head, and they figure out that Tommy Rainone is, going to be good for this card, and then they want to grind me down as far as me having to make concessions on how much I'm going to make for the fight, and then they got to find the right opponent on what he's going to make for the fight, so they can figure out what their profit margin is going to be, and that's the way that it works. So yeah, it was an absolute pain in the ass. It's something I don't miss. It's something oftentimes I felt like I was soliciting to people. It was a pain in the ass. These people would come into my fights anyway, but they didn't understand why they couldn't just buy the tickets online. They couldn't just buy the tickets at the venue, and I had to explain to them, like, the promoter needs to know it's coming directly from me. So yeah, it was a big pain in the ass.
Talk about some of the unique places that you fought in and why you chose. Give me the top 4 places that you fought in and why you chose to fight there.
Well, I believe it or not, that's sort of a promotional tool in a way for myself, or it was for myself, because a lot of my friends and family, they don't know about boxing, so it doesn't matter who I'm fighting, but where I'm fighting actually matters. So when I tell them, like, I'm fighting in Atlantic City, or I'm fighting, in Manhattan at Hammerstein Ballroom, that gets them excited, opposed to me fighting at some police athletic league in Yaphank, So yeah, I was lucky enough to fight at a lot of great venues. A lot of great venues. Obviously, the ones that stand out is Madison Square Garden, Yankee Stadium, Nassau Coliseum. Those are going to stand out on my resume immediately. But places like the Blue Horizon, like the Hammerstein Ballroom, like the Citadel in South Carolina. There are just so many awesome venues that I got to fight at. Even the space at Westbury, that's one of the more special ones to me. I got to fight there 3 times. Blue Horizon was awesome. So I had, as a teenager, I was always watching Tuesday night fights on USA, and they used to show fights from the Blue Horizon all the time. And I used to watch them, and all those fights were rumbles. Like, the crowd was thoroughly into it. Like, it was a wild scene. And then my 3rd pro fight was in the Poconos, and I met a guy that was working for ESPN Radio for Pennsylvania version of ESPN or whatever. He gave me his card. He told me to give him a call, and I stayed in touch with him. And then he invited me to a show at the Blue Horizon. Chaz Witherspoon was the main event. So I got a room, rented a room, went for the night, went with my girlfriend, went to the fights, went to the Blue Horizon, and I walked in, and I'm just like, this is a wild scene. Like, those boxing fans are passionate. And I said, I have to fight here. I absolutely have to fight here. So I told the guy, I'm just like, dude, whatever it takes, like, one way or another. I'm like, I'll come here, I'll fight a local Philly guy. It doesn't matter, I have to fight here. And it took another maybe 4 or 5 months. It happened kind of quick, considering. But then I got to fight the Blue Horizon. They hated me. I fought a guy from Philadelphia. I'm from New York. They booed the fuck out of me as soon as I walked into the ring. They couldn't stand me, but it was an awesome experience. And then I got to go back to the Blue one more time before it closed. Probably about a year later, I went to go see Eddie Chambers fight. Me and my friend took a road trip there, same deal, got a hotel room, went to the fights, got some cheesesteaks, and so I got to the Blue Horizon 3 times, one of which, the middle one, I got to fight at. So that's one that I'm proud of, because even more so because the Blue's not around anymore.
Yeah, yeah. And what about the fans are so close to the ring, that balcony?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They can't.
I could hear them, man. I
almost
could
touch
hear them
you.
while I was fighting. Like they fuck you, New York, and they were yelling and screaming, and it's distracting. And they were all against me. But yeah, you hear them loud and clear.
Was it the most hostile atmosphere you were ever in?
For a small room, no question about it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Just talk about fighting at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, but it's also, for me, it's a stain on my career. You know, it's not a great memory. Anybody can have their head cut off at the Coliseum and say they fought at the Coliseum, you know? So I had just fought at the Garden, so I mean, that was amazing. I fought in the small room at the Garden, and then Top Rank was going to bring me back to fight in the big room at the Garden, which is where Cotto form was supposed to happen. So I was pumped. I'm going to fight in the big room at the Garden. And all of a sudden, I got switched over to Yankee Stadium. I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to fight at Yankee Stadium. And I trained decent for that fight. I didn't train super hard, but I didn't go easy either. And I was ready. And they pulled my opponent out because he took a fight foolishly in North Carolina, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks before we were supposed to fight. They switched my opponent over, and, you know, I got ready for the fight, trained for the fight. Maybe 2 days before the fight, I get sick. Work through it, been there before. I should be fine fight night. And I felt amazing in the dressing room, warming up. I couldn't wait to get to the ring. I was pacing back and forth, looking at the TV monitor, hoping this fight ends in a knockout so I can get to the ring as quick as possible. I couldn't wait to go. And as soon as I walked into that ring and the sun hit me, I was dead. The bell rang. I came out, I threw a straight left hand, and it was like an out-of-body experience. I had nothing on it. I'm like, what the fuck? You don't pull out of Yankee Stadium. That opportunity is never going to come again. I've gone into fight sick before, and I've gotten through it. I thought I would get through that one. Couldn't get through that one. That fight is literally a blur to me. So I remember some of the first round, and then I remember basically just crawling to the finish line at the end of the 6th round. I don't know if heat stroke came along with it. I mean, like, it was a really rough experience. I remember going back to the dressing room after the fight and just laying down and telling my boy, I'm like, get a couple of water bottles. And he was just pouring water over me, and smoke was coming off me. It's just like smoke. Went into the shower and just stood there in an ice cold shower for 20 minutes, and just I wasn't myself. I mean, so that one haunts me and always will.
What about Robbie Cannon?
Cannon, you know, that one's funny because I overtrained for that fight because, as you remember, Sandy happened. Yeah. So I'm ready to go on November 1st.
This is our main event of the evening, scheduled for 10 rounds. Tommy Rainone against Robert Cannon.
And I'm at 147 pounds, and I trained hard for 6 weeks. And then Hurricane Sandy happens, and the fight gets postponed 2 weeks. And I got to hold that weight down, and we got no power on Long Island. Right. The gym's not open. Right. I'm out running 4 or 5 miles every night, jumping over trees and electrical wires, doing whatever I can to keep the weight down. So by the time I got in the ring with him, I was overtrained at that point. I had to keep that weight down for the next couple of weeks. And if you watch that fight, the first 3-4 rounds, I'm sharp as a tack. I came out strong. Everything I was hitting him with, I was hurting him with. And I was the bully and the boss in there.
Why are you in it? It's the reason I'm in it. It's the reason so many of us are in it. We are addicted. And his addiction paid off to hard training and launching a great shot, which just dropped Cannon on the seat of his pants.
And then slowly but surely, like, my energy level just quickly dropped. And that's what happens when you overtrain for a fight. Overtraining for a fight is actually worse than undertraining for a fight. And rounds 5, 6, 7, 8, it was just me doing what I had to do to win the rounds, put the rounds in the bank, not to take too many chances. So, I mean, listen, it was an overall good performance, but it should have been a great performance. But again, I was overtrained for that fight. But I was happy to win the fight, happy to get my first belt. And but I do look back at that one and say that was one that I probably should have got rid of that guy in 4 or 5 rounds. I also think that was the first time I was going 10 rounds. I think that got in my head a little bit, knowing, because you can't think too much in there. Overthinking will actually get you tired. Right. Thinking to myself, oh, I'm up like 5 rounds to nothing plus a knockdown. I can't get beat in this fight on the cards. All I got to do is just stay on my feet for the next 5 rounds. Right. And then you start killing the clock and clinching and doing stupid shit that you might not normally do. Right. But you know, a win is a win is a win. You know, I still won that fight very easily.
You fought world champion Ishe Smith. Just talk about fighting him and how that fight came about.
Yes, so that fight, they offered me at 154 pounds. Obviously, I'm a welterweight, but Ishe was ranked in the top 10. I think he was number 6 in the world at the time. And when I looked at the top 10 at 154, I thought to myself, this is the most realistic guy that I can fight and beat. And I'm thinking to myself, going into the fight, like, wow, if I beat Ishe Smith at 154 pounds, somehow I'm going to be ranked in the top 10 in the world in a weight class that I'm not even in, which is wild. But the money was decent, and I thought that Ishe was at the tail end of his prime, and then I thought that I had a decent shot to beat him. And when we got to the weigh-in, I was shocked at how much bigger he was than me. Like, he was a lot bigger than me. My buddy Chris, my assistant trainer, thought he was wearing lifts in his shoes. He's like, dude, this guy's got lifts in his shoes. And I'm like, fighters don't do that shit. I'm like, he's gonna have to take his shoes off at the weigh-in, so we'll find out. No, he didn't have any lifts in his shoes. He was just a lot bigger than me. And that fight started out, I'll tell you, I felt okay the first round. Second round, he hit me with a hook right in the ear. Only time I ever got hurt real good, or wobbled, I should say, in a pro fight. I did a little dance, and then he followed up. I was able to make a miss, grab him, wrap him up, and the bell rang. And I went back to the corner. I was a little wobbly. I'm like, what the fuck? Because my head was clear. So he broke my eardrum. My equilibrium is off for the rest of the fight. After the fight was over, my left ear was, I had to go to the hospital to get stitches anyway. Yeah. And they were going to inject my ear. They didn't. But my left ear was, it looked like an elephant. So he hit me with a shot in the, I think it was late in the third round, and that changed everything. Yeah. You know, but I remember my trainer Jorge in probably the 7th round or so, because I was getting a little bit of an ass kicking in that fight by a much bigger guy, and he threatened to stop the fight. And I'm like, I'll fucking kill you. Like, I meant it too, meant it. So, you know, you got to put me out. So, you know, either way, I was going to go the distance, or he was going to knock me out.
I remember talking to you for the weigh-in. I think it was your last fight, or your second last fight, because it was at the Coliseum.
I know exactly what you're going to tell me.
And you were so drained.
Yeah.
Like, never saw you. You had a hard time forming a sentence.
Yeah, I know.
Talk about the end and what it felt like for you.
I think about the end more than I think about the beginning and the middle. You know, let's see. So I think about those last 3 to 4 fights a lot, starting with the Nassau Coliseum fight that you're referring to. So that particular fight, I had just turned 37 years old. I was in a good position career-wise. I was coming off 2 good wins. I think I had won like 5 of my last 6. I was on the verge of something happening again, and I got the opportunity to fight at Nassau Coliseum, which was a dream come true. And had I won that fight, I had something else lined up with Ludabella to fight one of his prospects in a very realistic 55-45 type fight. Yeah, I'd be the underdog, but it was a situation that I could win. And getting ready for that Nassau fight, in between fights, I had gotten up to like 175 or so pounds. First time in my life. I'm getting older, my metabolism is slowing down, and you know, it just comes with age. So getting ready for that fight, it suddenly got harder. I trained for that fight, and I remember that was the first time. They say when a fighter starts thinking about retirement, he's already retired, right? I remember going out for runs, and I'm running 2-3 miles instead of my usual 4 or 5 miles, and thinking to myself, like, you know what? I win this fight, I could fight the Bella's guy and get a good payday and have a good opportunity to win that fight. But, you know, I don't know. I don't think I want to do this anymore. I think this might be it. You know, I might fight this fight, get my win at Nassau Coliseum, and call it a day. And then the week of the fight, making weight was brutal. I did the same way I always do. I came to this gym, the weigh-in's on Friday, came to this gym Thursday night, shadow box 5-6 rounds, jump rope 4 or 5 rounds, no liquid, I'm done eating. You know, now it's all, the whole drying out process has started. I get on the scale and I'm like, oh my God, I'm 164 pounds. I gotta be 151 pounds tomorrow. I pushed this too far. I get up in the morning, I get on the scale, I'm 160. I got 9 pounds I gotta take off. When I tell you, I went to the steam room, I mean, I was literally passing out. And I remember I kept getting out, I would check my weight, but oh my God, I got 5 more pounds to go. And I would lay down, and I remember sending a text message to my friend Brandon. I'm just like, dude, I'm 6 pounds over. I'm just like, I've never done this before, but I'm about to text the matchmaker and tell him to change the weight, and I'll give up some money. Like, I cannot make 151 pounds. Like, I'm dead, dude. And he's just like, yeah, he's like, that's probably the smart thing to do. But just the fighter in me, I'm not giving anybody free money. Oh, fuck it, I'm going in there again. I would go in the sauna for another 35 minutes and get out. Go in the sauna for another 35 minutes, get out. And finally got myself down to 151 pounds. When I walked into Nassau Coliseum, the first person that I saw was Sean Monahan. And Sean was like, hey, Tom, what's going on? Dude, you don't look so good. I'm like, Sean, I always look like this at weigh-ins. You know, I'm a little dried out, but yeah. He's like, you have trouble making weight? I'm like, yeah, but, you know, I've been here before. I'll be fine. He's like, all right, man. He's like, you don't look good. And I'm like, yeah. 2 seconds later, I see you, and you're like, hey, Tom, you all right? You don't look good. I'm just like, yeah, I'm fine, Bobby. And you said, I want to talk to you after the weigh-in. I'm like, no problem. So I was already getting like annoyed because I didn't want to even talk. I couldn't, like you said, I couldn't even swallow and form a sentence, After that weigh-in is completed, I go across the street to Borelli's, walked in there, and I told my friend, I'm just like, before you even sit down to order food, I'm like, because I don't even want to talk. I can't talk. I'm like, order me like 4 seltzers and a soda. So he explained to the waiter. By the time my meal came, there were like 8 glasses that were empty, all seltzers and sodas. I was just sucking them down. 1 sip, gone. 1 sip, gone. 1 sip, gone. And then I went home that night, rehydrated, thought I'd be good to go. The weight drain, I took off way too much weight. I got into the ring. I was absolutely dead. That was, and what I was getting at was that, as I said, you had interviewed me right after the weigh-in, right? I remember later on that night, when I went on Newsday.com, even I looked, holy shit, that's me. I couldn't believe what I looked like. I'm like, wow, I look bad. Even now, it shows up on my Facebook. The memories come up once a year, and that weigh-in picture will flash by where you see me like, I don't even have any muscle mass. There's nothing there. I'm just dead and dry, and it doesn't even look like me. And I took a picture. I remember, I have it. I don't have it on my phone right now, but I have a picture of when I walked out of that sauna. I got in the car. I had a hat on backwards and a Guns N' Roses t-shirt, and I took a selfie of myself, and I literally look like Skeletor. Like, it's unbelievable. So when I see this picture come up every couple of years, I'm like, Jesus Christ. So that's when I knew things were getting rough. And after that fight, I started making weight in a more intelligent manner, but my metabolism training, I couldn't make 147 anymore. I couldn't even make 150 or 151 anymore. So I was doing it smarter after that Nassau Coliseum experience, but even the second fight at Nassau Coliseum, I died making weight again, same deal. And then I had the last fight of my career was the Showboat in Atlantic City, and I struggled mightily there to make weight as well. So
People just react differently to walking away from something, and so when you walked away, how did you feel?
Well, my intention was to have one last fight, and I was supposed to fight at King's Theater in Brooklyn. And then I ended up getting cut down here sparring. I got hit with an elbow. So I was supposed to have my farewell fight, the final fight of my career. Everything was in place to fight in Brooklyn at King's Theater. And that fight fell through because of the cut. And then I had a couple other opportunities fall through. And then all of a sudden the pandemic happened. So it's almost like I never got my closure. But also, you know what? Sometimes no closure is closure. Because you know what? My career ended with 2 draws in a row. Could have been 2 losses in a row. Could have also been 2 wins in a row. But it wasn't. It was I wouldn't say a happy medium, but it was a medium that I'm not, something not to be ashamed of necessarily. So you know what, maybe if I pushed it and had that one last fight, things wouldn't have went well, and then I got to live with that thorn in my side the rest of my life. That, dude, you knew you had 2 draws in a row, and the previous one before that you lost at Nassau Coliseum. You knew it was time to get out, and you just kept fucking pushing like everybody does. And look what happened. Now you got your ass whipped again, and you have to go out like this. So, again, sometimes no closure is closure.